Good evening, everyone. Well, everybody that's here. We're going to keep on plugging along. I know there's a lot of people out sick and some people are gone on vacation, but we're going to keep on chugging along. So, anyway, good to see everyone here. There's a couple kids. There's several back there. They're studying Bible Bowl, and might have some others come in. Here's our prayer request and prayer list for right now. If y'all have anything else updated, David is in the Greenview Hospital. From what and Bay Jane's going back, everybody's been asking. David's had a kidney stone for a while, and he has a stent in with that kidney stone. Well, the stent has caused a hematoma somewhere around the kidney. So they're trying to figure all that out, and then he's not feeling well either. He might have a bout of pneumonia going on. So they're dealing with all that, so he's undergoing some tests and doing all that. Just got a word that Chris Thurman's showing some slow improvement, and they've taken him off the vent as of today. So that's good. He was on the ventilator for 2 weeks, so that's going good. Janet Hammock was undergoing some tests and tried to contact her today, and I did not hear back from her, but I'll try to find out most I can with that. And also, we have several people dealing with COVID in the congregation, so just praying for those that's dealing with issues and symptoms of that regard. Also, I forgot to put this up there. Miss Sarah Cummings, sister-in-law Barbara Cummings passed away, and I think those funeral services are Saturday at 11, and visitations begins 4 o'clock, I believe, on Friday at Gilbert Funeral Home. And she was a member out of the Tyree congregation. So keep those families in your prayers. Also, wedding shower this coming Sunday back in the fellowship hall for Christina and Alan. Their wedding's upcoming soon. Do need some gentlemen, if you could meet us back there after class. We need to, usually Steve and Eli help me set up tables for Amy and Michelle for the showers and stuff, but they're out of town this week, so I need a little bit of help. So if y'all can meet me back there in the fellowship hall after class, we'll get those tables and chairs set up for Amy and Michelle where they can decorate this weekend. That would be much appreciated. And then also, Donnie and Annie wanted me to remind everybody, Food Bank for Sims County Food Bank is coming up July 30th. They receive the truck on Tuesdays at about 9 to 9:30 on Tuesdays. If you're ever interested or need some a job to do or have some free time on your hand, just call me or Steve or Eli, and we can hook you up with that. We usually go over and help them unload the truck. Takes about an hour, 30 minutes to an hour, and we're done, and that gets them ready for Saturday. So if anyone would like to help out with that, please see me or Steve or Eli. All right? Let me check. Okay. Let's sing out. When upon life's billows you are tempest tossed, when you are discouraged thinking all is lost, count your many blessings, name them one by one, and it will surprise you what the Lord hath done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your blessings, see what God hath done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your many blessings, see what God hath done. Are you ever burdened with a load of care? Does the cross seem heavy you are called to bear? Count your many blessings, every doubt will fly, and you will be singing as the days go by. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your blessings, see what God hath done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your many blessings, see what God hath done. So amid the conflict, whether great or small, do not be discouraged, God is over all. Count your many blessings, angels will attend. Help and comfort give you to your journey's end. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your blessings, see what God hath done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your many blessings, see what God hath done. This song get the adults and teens ready for John's lesson. He's teaching on Elijah night, so let's sing out. These are the days of Elijah, declaring the word of the Lord. And these are the days of your servant Moses, righteousness being restored. And though these are days of great trials, of famine and darkness and sword, still we are the voice in the desert, crying, prepare ye the way of the Lord. Behold, he comes, riding on the clouds, shining like the sun. At the trumpet call, so lift your voice. It's a year of jubilee, and out of Zion's hill salvation comes. These are the days of Ezekiel, the dry bones becoming as flesh. And these are the days of your servant David, rebuilding a temple of praise. And these are the days of the harvest. The fields are as white in your world, and we are the laborers in your vineyard, declaring the word of the Lord. Behold, he comes, riding on the clouds, shining like the sun. At the trumpet call, so lift your voice. It's a year of jubilee, and out of Zion's hill salvation comes. Well, just a short little thought for us for devotion before we go to classes and back to Bible Bow and other places tonight and before John comes up. It's really hot. I didn't realize it was going to be that hot this week. I saw where the temperature was going to be like 90, and I was like, well, that's not that bad. And then I saw 109 heat index. I don't even know what it got up to today. I was looking at my phone. It was 103, 104, 105, somewhere in there. And they always say you're in the dog days of summer. So I looked that up, and I found a gentleman's devotional, and he found some information of that. And hopefully this is, I've researched it a couple times, and this is what I found out. Of course, sometimes you get stuff off the internet, you don't know whether to believe it or not, but this seems kind of accurate. It says, to the Greeks and the Romans, the dog days occurred around the day when Sirius appeared to rise just before the sun in late July. They refer to these days as the hottest time of the year, a period that could bring fever and even catastrophe. These dog days stretch from July 22nd to August 22nd. Which, of course, today's the 20th, right? So it begins in a couple days. So we're in the dog days of summer. But he goes on, this gentleman goes on to say, during those days, try to stay, we all need to try to stay hydrated. We all need to try to stay cool. We all need to try to stay all these different things, and we enjoy the air conditioning, and we enjoy this, and we have some of those blessings. The dog days of summers are long, and sometimes we have these changes of season. God blesses us with these changes of season, whether it be spring or summer, fall, winter. And some of us enjoy more seasons than others, and then we're always like, well, why is it so hot in fall? Well, you step out, if you're in Kentucky, you just wait till the next day. We've always heard it. But the weather always changes. We never know what we're going to get. And, even the forecasts are wrong sometimes. But what I'm getting to is, during all these times, especially during the dog days of summer, and during this heat, I've had several calls about electric bills. I've had several calls about homelessness or this and that and other things. We need to be in prayer for those people, and we try to help out as many as we can. And be in prayer for people that are struggling. Be in prayer for people that might need a little helping hand. And you know who those people are. And we need to take care of our own. You know, we call around and see how our elderly are doing and all these different things. During this time, you know, sometimes we might need to take the centerpiece off of us because we're hot, we're this and that, we're complaining all the time. We don't need to complain. We need to just be prayerful that we're here. We need to be prayerful that God is still in control. And we need to be prayerful for all those around us during maybe one of these times of the year because, you know, it always comes. These seasons, there's different seasons. Different people are getting affected by different things. But we need to be prayerful and mindful of what we have. And make sure we're practicing that daily prayer. But have a sense of blessing and understanding of what we do have. Think about at night, you know, what we do have and how we can, you know, just maybe reach out to someone. So we might be struggling a little bit. It might be hot. But let's have blessings for what we have each and every day. Let's say a prayer and then we'll be dismissed. Dear Father, we thank you for all the blessings of life. And dear Father, we know you are the great and almighty that you are. And dear Father, sometimes we don't understand why the rain doesn't come this time or it gets so hot and all that, but we just need to understand that you're in control and that we need to give all that control to you, and we just need to be prayerful and mindful of that. And also, dear Father, be prayerful and mindful of those that might be struggling during these heat waves, those that work out in it, work in the places where it's hot, and provide things for this nation, this community, and our families, dear Father. Be prayerful for the farmers that need the rain. Be prayerful for people that might not have an air conditioner to take care of themselves, or whatever the case may be, dear Father. Let us just be mindful of that and understand that, and let us not be down and mad and greedy for maybe an air conditioner sometime. Maybe just let us understand what's going on, and let us be just mindful of that. Dear Father, thank you for all the blessings you give us. We ask and pray that you be for all those on the prayer list, be with those that have lost loved ones, be with the Cummins family and their loss, and be with that family during the next couple of days and weeks and months ahead. Dear Father, just be with Brother John tonight as he teaches the adult class, and also be with the teachers down Sunshine Street and our kids back in Bible Bowl tonight, and let us learn something from the lessons and everything that we're taught tonight, and have a blessing towards that. Thank you again for your son. In Jesus' name, pray, amen. The teens will stay in here for the adult class if you're not in Bible Bowl or you're not in Sunshine Street. And then any fifth graders that are not in Bible Bowl, you are in the museum tonight. All right? All right, everybody's dismissed. Or adults, you stay, and John will be up here in a minute.
Well, I remember when it used to be a lot bigger than this on Wednesday night. Boy, COVID has really damaged everything, hasn't it? So glad when it finally leaves, which I thought it was gone, but I was wrong again. It's not. So I was asked to speak on Elijah being a bold prophet, being able to speak boldly for the Lord. And I realized there's a whole lot more to this than just his speech. So I thought, when I started into this, I thought, I don't really remember this story very well. I've read through the Old Testament all the way through, but all those prophets start kind of getting mixed together in my mind, and I struggle with remember who's who. So I thought it would be good to just go over who Elijah was and some of the things he did and some of the things that are important to us and maybe how it might relate to us today. So Elijah was a prophet of God, and he lived between 900 and about 849 BC. Now, this was confusing to me, For all of those that are a long ways from 5th and 6th grade, BC goes the other way, okay? So the bigger the number, the further from Christ. So BC means before Christ. So this is about 900 years that he was born before Christ in a land called Tish. Now, another point, I'm going to digress a little bit here and there for things that I think might be important. If you notice today, if you'll go to a textbook or you go to a museum, you'll not see BC anymore. You're going to see BCE. And what BCE stands for is before Common Era. When I first saw that, the first time I went into a museum, I thought, what in the world's going on? Have they changed everything? Well, I looked it up. They're taking Christ out of the timeline. And when you see BCE now in a museum or a textbook, what that really is trying to do is just say that, okay, Christ might have been the timeline, but he's not really a timeline, and we're going to do away with Christ in the timeline. So when I first saw that, and it has nothing to do with this topic, but if you're in a museum and you see that, that's what that is. That's the curators getting rid of Christ in the timeline. That bothered me a lot and still does. When this occurred, Israel was deep in the worship of Baal. Now, I want to talk a minute about polytheism versus monotheism. Monotheism is the belief that there is but one God, and you are worshiping just one God. Now, that one God may be Zeus, Jupiter, Apollo, Baal, but it's the worship of just one God. This time frame from sort of the beginning of time, which you could say is probably somewhere around 10,000 BC, all the way up through this time, monotheism, or the worship of one God, is really rare. And that's why it's so unusual that Abraham worships one God on his own, because that is not the way society is going. At this time frame, people are worshiping many gods, and this still happens today. If you're in Japan, they worship their ancestors, they worship multiple different gods. If you're pretty much anywhere in Asia, you will see that. And then false gods are the same now as they were before. We have Muhammad, we have all the different gods, the Hindu gods. So this is not a real surprise to anyone. But during this time frame, there is a god called Baal. Now, Baal was worshipped by the Canaanites, and if you remember, that's the people that that got kicked out to create Israel. The Hittites, the Jebusites. Remember all that? Where it's always like all the ites are in the same thing. So the Canaanites were a group of people, and they created a god named Baal in about 1400 BC. So that's about 500 years before Elijah's born. So Baal's been in existence for about 500 years prior to that. The Egyptians then borrowed him. The Egyptians were a lot like the Romans. They didn't care how many gods they had. In fact, they were more than willing to always bring another one in. One more god when you have 1,000 doesn't really make much difference. 1,001 is no big deal. So that's how the Egyptians were. They were more than glad to borrow people. Baal was the god of fertility, the god of rain and dew. So in other words, he was the god of having children and the god of being able to allow the earth to create plants. Okay? He was to the Canaanites like Zeus was Greece and Jupiter was Rome. If you notice that for all those English majors, I did not capitalize Zeus and Jupiter. I don't agree with capitalizing someone who isn't God, although I did capitalize Baal, but that's the beginning of the sentence. So I did that on purpose. It was not a grammatical error. I just don't feel like they should be capitalized when they're not God. Watch me mess up and have done it somewhere else. So Baal worship was pretty riotous. Now, I want to explain. Good, no kids in here. So I want to explain to you a lot of worship at this time frame in a polytheistic society would have a lot of temple prostitutes, okay? Now, a temple prostitute would be female or male, and they would be considered a priest or priestess of the god, and they would come down at night and prostitute themselves, and then the money they made would go back to the temple of their god, okay? So this was a common, normal practice of multiple polytheistic societies at this point. And it's through the Romans, it's through the Greeks, it's all through all of this, and because that's the way things were done. That's how you made money for your God. You didn't pass the plate, you sold yourself. So they're to worship him, and this is if you look, there's actually on the left hand, I guess that would be, it'd be on your left. On the left-hand side, you'll see a pole, and you'll see this guy holding that pole. That is an Asherah pole. It represents a phalanx, and it represents the fertility that Baal represents. And you read about that in the Bible all the time about Asherah poles. Well, Asherah goes right along with Baal, and they would create these large poles that would represent what they're worshiping, and they would worship that pole, and they would worship the false god Baal. They would have wild parties that had to do with fertility, if you understand what I mean. They had homosexuality and perversion. So this is not, it's not a benign worship of some piece of rock or piece of wood, which God never finds benign. But this is a very polluted, perverted form of worship, okay? So, in about 950 or so, Solomon dies, and the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom separate. We know the southern kingdom mostly as Judah because that's the largest portion of the southern kingdom, and in essence, a lot of times you'll hear the southern kingdom called Judah. Most of the Bible refers to the northern kingdom upon the timeline of the southern kingdom's kings. So as we read this together, you're going to see it'll say in the 36th year of the king Asa's reign. And it's kind of confusing because you're like, well, if Asa's reigning, why is this guy reigning? It's because there's two kingdoms now. When Solomon died, the first king that took over could not hold power. And he made some large errors, and it immediately ruptured the kingdom into a northern and a southern. The southern kingdom had two, but with Judah being the primary, and the northern kingdom had 10. There were some not so good southern kings, but the northern kings, by far and away, were the worst. They really struggled with promoting worship of foreign gods, and that is what Elijah is dealing with. So Ahab, who is the king of the north, marries a woman named Jezebel. Now, I took an artist rendition of Jezebel, and then you might be wondering, what in the world is a football player doing besides Jezebel? I'm going to digress because I think it's funny. I see a lot of people. It's like 7,000 or 8,000 people a year in my clinic, and I've done that now for 23 years. I've seen a lot of names. I have never, ever seen anyone named Jezebel so far. And I've seen every Bible. Some of them you're like, really? I don't think you should have used that name. But I've seen every name almost in the Bible repeated by somebody, somewhere, except Jezebel. I've never seen that name. A professor I had at Marshall, he named his CPR dummy Jezebel. His name was Ed Prelaz, and I'll never forget walking into that class, and he'd go, Jezebel, Jezebel, wake up! And he'd start pushing that dummy, and I was always thinking, well, that's just weird. But it was funny. I mean, it was funny. And the reason I put Chad Pennington up there, Chad Pennington was a quarterback at Marshall University. Beth Ann had the exact same professor I did. She had Ed Prelaz 6 years after me because I'm a lot older than her. And she had Chad Pennington, who went on to play for the Jets. And she said that it was the same name. Everything, it was hilarious. She told me what he did. It was exactly the same thing he did 6 years before, except Chad was in her class. And he used to harass Chad every week and say, Chad, are you going to win on Saturday? He's 6'5", and she said he would crawl under the desk and try to make himself not be able to be seen. But she said you couldn't make 6'5" crawl under a desk. So anyways, I digress. Because Jezebel is a name that instantaneously means evil, right? There's no mama going to name their baby Jezebel because this is an evil name. But how many of you really know why? Well, this story is really rotated around Jezebel. Jezebel, in the Bible, it's going to call her a Sidonian princess. Most historians in the rest of the world is going to call that Phoenicia. So she was from Phoenicia, and Ahab marries her. So I'm going to go to the Bible now, and we're going to read some of this. Let me lay this down before I accidentally hit it. So if you want to follow along, this is the NIV version off of my phone, which is where I read almost all Bible now. 16, we're going to read 29 through 33. Oh, that's chapter 17. 16, chapter 16, 29. In the 38th year of Asa, king of Judah, Ahab, son of Omri, became king of Israel, and he reigned in Samaria of Israel 22 years. Ahab, son of Omri, did more evil in the eyes of the Lord than any of those before him. He not only considered it trivial to commit the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, but he also married Jezebel, daughter of Ithbaal, king of the Sidonians, and began to serve Baal and worship him. He set up an altar for Baal in the temple of Baal that he built in Samaria. Ahab also made an Asherah pole and did more to arouse the anger of the Lord, the God of Israel, than did all the kings of Israel before him. Now, he's the seventh king since the split, and so far, God's saying he's the worst. You know, I don't want to be called the worst of anything. And the first king, his guy's name is Jeroboam, son of Nebat. And as you read the Old Testament, you'll keep hearing he was worse than Jeroboam, son of Nebat. It's almost like Jeroboam is the litmus test. He did a terrible job. And your job as a king, when God looked at you, were you worse than Jeroboam or better than Jeroboam? I mean, and this guy was significantly worse than Jeroboam. So, why? Why was he so bad? Let's go to Kings 11, 1 and 2. Kings 11, 1 and 2. King Solomon, however, loved many foreign women besides Pharaoh's daughter, Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonians, and Hittites. They were from the nations about which the Lord had told the Israelites, quote, "You must not intermarry with them, because they will surely turn your hearts after their gods." Nevertheless, Solomon held fast to them in love. Solomon made an error before this king was ever born. He had all of these wives from all of these different places. And God told the Israelites, don't marry outside of Israel. If you do, you'll leave me and start worshiping other false gods. Ahab was warned. Solomon was warned. They didn't listen. And because of that, Jezebel creates a mess that only God, through Elijah, can fix. So, Elijah is called by God. We're going to read this. And he's called to bring a drought. So I want to read that next. 1 Kings 17, just for the first verse. Now Elijah the Tishbite from Tishbe in Gilead said to Ahab, "As the Lord the God of Israel lives, whom I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain in the next few years except at my word." So God asks him to create a drought. Now, you might be going, what in the world is this picture? So for those, some of you might have seen this. This is Lake Mead. Lake Mead out in the Nevada area is now dry. That is a barrel in which someone threw a murdered person 30 years ago at the bottom of the lake, and it just came back up to surface because the lake dried up. So that is where almost all the water in the Southwest comes from. Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Southern California, they are in the largest drought they've been in hundreds of years. If this continues, they're all moving to Kentucky. Don't laugh, I'm telling you, they're coming. Because there's no water. And if there's no water, there's no plants. If there's no plants, there's no animals. No water means no food. No food and no water means you leaving. You going somewhere else. And with the climate change that's occurring, Kentucky and Tennessee are going to be right at the edge of what's going to be the really nice area that can still grow crops. In fact, we'll probably be able to grow them for 12 months out of the year. I for years would have thought it'd been my grandchildren. I don't think so anymore. I think it's going to be our children or even ourselves that see this happen. But either way, the bottom of Lake Mead, you can now see it where the bodies are washing up that people have thrown in there and hidden. So I'm going to ask you, and I'm just sort of leaving it there. One of the things about God that I've noticed through reading the Bible is He repeats Himself. He does the same thing. Did you know there's a huge drought in Europe? There's a huge drought in America. God gave this drought to the northern kingdoms and the southern kingdom to some degree because He wanted the people to come back to Him. He wanted them to go, look, there's something wrong. We need to go back and worship the God that loves us and get rid of these foreign gods. I don't know if that's what God's up to now, but it sure seems awfully odd to me, and it seems like a repeat. History repeats itself, and I believe that's where we're headed again. So, I'm going to read this section and then explain what this is. 1 Kings 17, 7 through 12. Sometime later, the brook dried up because there had been no rain in the land. Then the word of the Lord came to him, "Go at once to Zarephath in the region of Sidon and stay there. I have directed a widow there to supply you with food." So he went to Zarephath. When he came to the town gate, a widow was gathering sticks. He called to her and asked, "Would you bring me a little water in a jar so I may have a drink?" As she was going to get it, he called, "And bring me, please, a piece of bread." "As surely as the Lord your God lives," she replied, "I don't have any bread, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little olive oil in a jug. I am gathering a few sticks to take home and make a meal for myself and my son that we may eat it and die." I mean, that's really sad. I mean, you think about this. This drought is so severe that she is out of food because food doesn't grow without water. And she's out of oil because you can't create plants. Plants can't create olive oil if they're dying. And there's no water. So she's already decided this is going to be their last meal. She's going to go home, fix the meal, and die. It's so bad that the brook that Elijah is staying by dries up. Okay? And he sends Elijah to Zarephath, and then he creates a miracle where the jar never empties of water, and the jar never empties of, oil, and the jar never empties of flour. By the way, this is what a jar would look like in that time frame. This is called an amphora. And sometimes they'll find them on the bottom of the ocean, thousands of them where a ship has fallen. But that's what these would look like. That's a pretty nice one. But that's about the same time frame. So they're not just jars. They're actually really beautifully decorated pottery for those that are interested. All right, so he's in this household. Everything's going well. Everybody's happy because they've got food, they've got water, and they've got oil because they have a prophet of the God living with them. But then something terrible happens to this widow. Her son gets sick, and in the period of less than about a day or two, dies. And I want to read what Elijah does with this. So this is verses 19 through 21. Actually, let's go 17. Sometime later, the son of the woman who owned the house became ill. He grew worse and finally stopped breathing. She said to Elijah, "What do you have against me, man of God? Did you come to remind me of my sin and kill my son?" "Give me your son," Elijah replied. He took him from his arms, carried him to the upper room where he was staying, and laid him on his bed. Then he cried out to the Lord, "Lord my God, have you brought tragedy even on this widow I am staying with by causing her son to die?" Then he stretched himself out on the boy 3 times and cried out to the Lord, "Lord my God, let this boy's life return to him." The Lord heard Elijah's cry, and the boy's life returned to him, and he lived. Elijah picked up the child and carried him down from the room into the house. He gave him to his mother and said, "Look, your son is alive." Then the woman said to Elijah, "Now I know that you are a man of God, and the word of the Lord from your mouth is the truth." So Elijah brings this boy back to life. And I don't know for certain, but I almost think that this was so that Zarephath could see that he really was a man of God. For whatever reason, God did it to prove Elijah was his prophet. Now, during this same time frame, Jezebel is going about killing prophets of God so she can make her prophets of Baal even stronger. And I brought this, and you might think, well, what's the Colosseum have to do with that? That is not my picture. Yes, I just came back from there, but I am not that good a photographer. I stole that photo. If you are standing about where that front door of the Colosseum is, and you look to your left, there's this giant hill. When I say hill, maybe 50, 60 feet tall. On top of that hill is a skate park, of which while we were there, they were having the world skating competition. I got to watch these girls. Man, I didn't know you could do that stuff with the board and little wheels. It was pretty amazing. Underneath that skate park lies the palace of Nero. It has not been excavated or archaeologically dug up because they just don't have enough money to dig up everything. Okay? So when you go to Rome, you can't stumble over something old. If you just dig down a few feet, there's something under your feet anywhere you are that is super old. Well, what I did that to explain that for is that's many years. That's 1,000 years into, well, about 600 years into the future of this. And Nero is a king that was considerably crazy. I mean, there's no other way to put it. He was nuts. And he actually had a party in his garden at this palace. Now, this palace was approximately, I think it was 20 acres in size. It's insane how big this hill is. And in his garden, he took Christians and put them on a pole and lit them on fire. And he used those burning Christians as the nightlight for his party. And that guy didn't hold a candle to Jezebel. Jezebel killed almost all of the prophets. If you listen to what Elijah says later, Elijah gets kind of depressed. And he says, God, I'm the only one left. I'm it. There's nobody else in all of Israel that's following you. Everybody's following Baal. And God says, you are not the only one left. I have 7,000 that have never bowed their knee. God knew every single person that did not bow their knee to that foreign god. And guess what? He knows every single person today that isn't bowing their knee to a foreign god. Now, we aren't bowing our knee to a Hindu god or to Muhammad or something like that, but we have plenty of things that we consider gods, right? Money, time, sports, someone we love. I mean, there should be nothing in your life that you're not willing to give up for God. You know, if you look at something and go, I just love that car, and you're out washing your car, spraying your car, waxing your car. If that car was something that if God came down and said, I need that car, that would bother you and you would struggle, then that's not a car you need. It's a possession. You're not going to take it with you. That, in America, I think, is more of ours. But that being said, the rise of Islam is higher than you think. There are a lot of people switching from Christianity toward Islam, much more than you think that is going on. And that is a foreign god. There's no way to reconcile. Muhammad is not God. Kings 18, 1 through 9. King 18. After a long time, in the 3rd year, the word of the Lord came to Elijah. Go and present yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain on the land. So Elijah went to present himself to Ahab. Now the famine was severe in Samaria. Now Samaria, that's the northern kingdom, okay? That's the capital area of the northern kingdoms. And Ahab had summoned Obadiah, his palace administrator. Obadiah was a devout believer in the Lord. While Jezebel was killing off the Lord's prophets, Obadiah had taken 100 prophets and hidden them in 2 caves, 50 in each, and had supplied them with food and water. Ahab had said to Obadiah, go through the land to all the springs and valleys. Maybe we can find some grass to keep the horses and mules alive, so we will not have to kill any of our animals. So they divided the land, and they were to cover, Ahab going in one direction and Obadiah in the other. Remember, Ahab's the king. As Obadiah was walking along, Elijah met him. Obadiah recognized him, bowed down to the ground, and said, is it really you, my lord Elijah? Yes, he replied. Go tell your master, Elijah is here. What have I done wrong? Asked Obadiah, that you are handing your servant over to Ahab to be put to death. As surely as the Lord your God lives, there is not a nation or kingdom where my master has not sent someone to look for you. And whenever a nation or kingdom claimed you were not there, he made them swear they could not find you. But now you tell me to go to my master and say, Elijah is here. I don't know where the Spirit of the Lord may carry you off when I leave you. If I go and tell Ahab and he doesn't find you, he will kill me. Yet I, your servant, have worshipped the Lord since my youth. Haven't you heard, my Lord, what I did while Jezebel was killing the prophets of the Lord? I hid 100 of the Lord's prophets in 2 caves. That's good enough. Now, so this palace administrator, you can kind of call him, he'd be like a prime minister, in essence. He's in charge of everything, trying to make everything run, okay? But there's a king over him. So this would be like the old style of England, where there's a king, but the king actually made decisions, and underneath him is a prime minister who actually carried out his will. This guy's hiding people in caves. He's hiding the prophets in caves so that Jezebel can't kill them. All right? This is a true believer in God. But, did you catch he's hiding? All right? He's not telling anybody about this. He's not out there telling anyone that he's doing this. He's doing this in secret. Why is he doing this in secret? Because if he goes talking about this as being that high up, Jezebel just have him killed. Jezebel would have him killed in a minute for hiding the prophets of the Lord, right? Because she wants the prophets of Baal to succeed. So Ahab, he's told to go get Ahab, bring him back, let me have a talk with him. I want to stop just here for a second because this is such an interesting thing. We don't really understand, I think, in America a lot about foreign religions that old. This is one that we saw we were in Rome. You go into this church, and it's the San Clemente Church in Rome, and it's also called the Lasagna Church. I know, and it's kind of funny. What's called lasagna because it's layered. The top layer is this beautiful church that you walk into that's all gilded in gold, and it's ancient things. It's about 1000 A.D. You go down a set of stairs, and you reach the church that was there before that. It's 400 A.D. You go down another set of stairs, and you reach a church that actually goes all the way back to the 1st century. And in the 1st century, there is a house church. You know how in the 1st century in the New Testament, everybody meets in everybody's house? Well, when they stopped meeting in the house, they just build a church on top of it. And when that church got dilapidated, they build another church on top of that. And beside the 1st century church is this. This is something called Mithras worship. It's very much like Baal. They worship, in essence, they sacrifice cattle. They sacrifice bulls, just like we're about to read. There's almost no difference in this, except this is kind of neat. That's why I brought this out, is to explain that this stuff's been going on for millennia. People have been worshiping gods that didn't exist, and they always, for some reason, want to kill a bull. I don't know what that's about, but they always got to kill a bull. So in here, in that little tiny place, that's the altar. Now remember, this is 50 feet or so down underneath the church. That's underneath the church. That's underneath the church. And that hole, they would slaughter the bull up there. They would slit its throat. They'd let the blood run down onto the new worshiper who would be standing in the altar being covered in the bull's blood. I know, that's just gross. But that's what they did. And to some degree, it's different God, but it's the same concept. It's the same reasoning. It's the same, everything's kind of the same. I don't know why they love bulls, but that's what all these worshipers did, was kill bulls. And this picture I did not take. This is a stock photo because you're not allowed to take pictures in there. 16 through 21. So Obadiah went to meet Ahab and told him, and Ahab went to meet Elijah. When he saw Elijah, he said to him, "Is that you, you troubler of Israel?" I have not made trouble for Israel," Elijah replied, "but you and your father's family have. You have abandoned the Lord's commands and followed the Baals. Now summon the people from all over Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel, and bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table." Think about that for a minute. How much money the king and queen of the northern tribe of Israel is spending. They're feeding 850 prophets every day, right? And in the meantime, they're killing off the Lord's prophets. Elijah went before, so Ahab sent word throughout all Israel and assembled the prophets on Mount Carmel. Elijah went before the people and said, "How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him, but if Baal is God, follow him." But the people said nothing. Then Elijah said to them, "I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left, but Baal has 450 prophets. Get 2 bulls for us, Let Baal's prophets choose one of themselves for themselves, and let them cut it into pieces, and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. The God who answers by fire, he is the God. So he says, I'm alone. I'm the only prophet left. He was just told there were 100 of them in caves. It's kind of funny. I think he's a little bit of a depressed fellow, but I guess if I had to do this, I would be too. Remember, he is speaking to a king who has the right to take his life at any minute. That's bold. I don't know how many of us would walk up to a president and tell them what they're doing is morally bankrupt, because that's what he's doing. He's not only going to walk up and tell him he's wrong, he is such power and belief in God that he is going to do something that turns out just amazing. He says, you take your 450 prophets of Baal, your 400 prophets of Asherah, you put all of those 850 people together, and you all slaughter a bull and make fire come down from heaven and make your bull catch on fire. So this starts in the early day, and these people, the prophets, about midday, they're still crying out, they're still calling out to Baal, they're begging and pleading their God to do what Elijah asks. Finally, Elijah starts doing something I think is funny. He said, maybe your God is busy. Maybe he's taking a trip. Maybe he's taking a nap. And then he says, maybe he's in the bathroom. This is funny. And they start getting mad and angry. So they take whips and they start beating themselves. And they take knives and they start cutting themselves, because that way they can get the attention of their God. This goes on all the way until evening. And of course, no one answers, because Baal is not a god. Elijah tells them to dig a moat around. He takes 12 stones. He rebuilds the altar, because things are so bad at this point, the altar has been destroyed. So he rebuilds the altar. He puts a moat around it. He has them pour water on the bull 3 times. Then he asks God to bring fire down. Fire comes immediately down. It destroys everything and licks up all the water until it is dry. I'm going to read that for you. And I'm skipping a little bit in between there. I'll probably just read it here. So 25 to 34. Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, choose one of the bulls and prepare it first, since there are so many of you. Call on the name of your God, but do not light the fire. So they took the bull given them and prepared it. Then they called on the name of Baal from morning till noon. Baal, answer us, they shouted, but there was no response. No one answered. And they danced around the altar they had made. At noon, Elijah began to taunt them. Shout louder, he said. Surely he is God. Perhaps he's deep in thought, or busy, or traveling. Maybe he is sleeping. He must be awakened. So they shouted and slashed themselves with swords and spears as they were accustomed, until their blood flowed. Midday passed, and they continued their frantic prophesying until the time from the evening sacrifice. But there was no response. No one answered. No one paid attention. Then Elijah said to all the people, come here to me. They came to him and repaired the altar of the Lord, which had been torn down. Elijah took 12 stones, one for each of the tribes descended from Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come. Your name shall be Israel. With the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he dug a trench around it, large enough to hold 2 seahs of seed. That's somewhere around about 24 pounds, if we know their measurements correctly. He arranged the wood, cut the bull into pieces, and laid it on the fire. Laid it on the wood. Then he said to them, fill 4 large jars with water and pour it on the offering. Do it again, he said, and they did it again. Do it a 3rd time, he ordered. They did it a 3rd time. God brings down fire, destroys the bull, licks up the fire in the trenches, and everything goes back. Then they depart after they kill all the prophets of Baal. Elijah sends everyone up to kill all the prophets. These are false prophets. That's what they deserve. And then he goes out and he prays for rain, and the rain comes. The whole concept of this, the drought, was so Israel would come back to the Lord. So 2 or 3 years of lack of water, lack of food, and relative misery, just so God could get them to come back to him and leave the Baals alone. But Elijah was his mouthpiece. He was the mouth on the earth to tell these people what they were doing wrong. I'm going to read this last set of verses. This will get you out about 10 minutes or so early. I'm usually always a little early. Let's see, so 36 through 39. At the time of sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed that, Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, that I am your servant and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you, Lord, are God and that you are turning their hearts back again. Then the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the soil, and also licked up the water in the trench. When all the people saw this, they fell prostrate and cried, the Lord, He is God, the Lord, He is God. Well, I think this is apropos to us. I think it's very important to us. We need to take notice and make sure that God is the primary in our lives. Thank you all.